Good morning. It is Monday, May 9th, 2022, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Since we last talked, corn planting has fallen further behind the average pace. Russian forces have increased their assault on Ukrainian grain storage and export facilities. The Federal Reserve increased interest rates. Diesel prices have climbed to record levels. Stock trade has turned wildly volatile, and Rich Strike made the Kentucky Derby deadline the entry deadline by 30 seconds, hit the track from the far outside gate, was the 80-1 longest of all the long shots, and won the race by snaking his way along the rail in the final 1/8 of a mile. It was an astonishing race. Good morning, Jim Wiesemeyer. How are you this morning?
If I would have been there, I would have bet on him. I always
Sure,
like
why
to bet
not?
on the wild one, just for giggles.
And Wild One is right. They've got the handlers' ponies, help them make their way back from the race or to the gates. After that race, that Rich Strike was a bad boy. He was a bad boy with that pony. He was pretty wound up, but a great race.
Yes.
Just a fast. It was absolutely great. All right. Good morning, Melody, and good morning, CB. They've got it figured out. There's a comments tab there on your page. Click on that, and that is how we communicate. The other way that we communicate is by email. You can send me an email anytime. Just make it to send it to host@agritalk.com. And Jim, I'm going to start with kind of a sensitive issue here when it comes to global trade. And this one came in from Greg just this morning by email. Last week, we had Phil Flynn on the show. He's an energy analyst at Price Futures Group. And he mentioned that space in pipelines for diesel is expensive. And he believed it was in part due to diesel headed to the export terminals. Now, diesel on Long Island is at $6.49 a gallon. Greg is asking, is an export ban coming for diesel fuel? Seems better to keep our diesel fuel home for farmers and truck drivers.
I will never rule anything out in this economic and political environment, Chip, but I don't see it at this particular time. Not yet. And I think that there would be officials within the National Economic Council and elsewhere arguing against that. But again, I hate to play both sides. I'm not going to rule it out.
Okay, so last week on the Farmer Forum on Wednesday on AgriTalk, had Ken McCauley from Kansas, had Gary Niemeyer from Illinois, two past presidents of the National Corn Growers Association. And they talked about a Jimmy Carter moment. Is there going to be a Jimmy Carter moment for the Biden administration in dealing with what is happening with inflation, dealing what's happening with Ukraine, food scarcity in spots around the world? If we put any kind of an embargo on any kind of trade, that's a Jimmy Carter moment.
It is, and it would show that we didn't learn that Jimmy Carter moment didn't work out. I just, it's more of the hope that does not occur. The market cannot solve everything. However, it has a way of dealing with these things, as you well know, Chip. And and once it deals with it, price rationing, demand rationing, it can settle out fairly quickly. So I just hope that they let it rip. And I think you're beginning to see that in the wheat market right now, that we don't know what we're seeing some exaggerated highs. Maybe the specs are starting to move out of some commodities such as corn, not in a big way yet, but the numbers are starting to show it. So let's let it work out. Let it work out.
Okay. It's funny that you say it that way, because after I had the interview with Flynn and the thought did pop into my mind, geez, maybe we should just not export it all. I had to go, and I didn't say it on the air, thank God. Um, but I had to go and watch some Steve Forbes, and who is a vehement let the market work it out guy.
Yes.
And I went and listened to some of his comments again that I've got on file, and I got back to the let the market work it out. This is just one of those cases where that is how it's got to happen.
Yes, and we've got things that they've tried in the past under, I keep saying, I remember Nixon when he had a sales suspension
Mhm.
until new crop came along. So, all those are the tools of the past,
Yeah.
but they can put a sledgehammer to prices very quickly.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Jim, you were on the road last week. What'd you learn?
Oh, both crop insurance events, RCIS meeting in Florida and SEPA agents meetings, crop insurance agents in Kansas City, both well attended. And more than a few participants came up to me and they said they listen or view signal to noise. And, a number of them, Chip, and these were some farmers there ask whether or not there could be a crop insurance policy relative to fertilizer that would get them covered in the case of corn if they couldn't get fertilizer delivered. Not so much on the price of fertilizer. It's
Okay.
whether or not it's almost like a pseudo prevent plant. Now I know
Huh.
insurance companies don't want any more risk exposure. So this could be, I told him, I said it could be maybe a shared one with the government and the insurance system where the government puts in some of the, subsidies. But I did hear that in a number of cases where farmers would like an insurance policy if they were unable, they could pay for it, but if it's unable to be delivered.
Yeah, that's interesting, but it's also pretty easy to manipulate.
Yeah, well, there'd have to be caveats all
Yeah.
over the place on it, and that's why privately, when I talk to crop insurance agents and the underlying companies, there's a lot of risk involved there.
Yeah. Yeah. But what that speaks to is the level of uncertainty that we are dealing with at this time because of the interruption in supplies and the issues that we're dealing with around the world. Uh, it, if we start talking about some sort of a force majeure on fertilizer deliveries, this is it's a weird, strange world, man.
Yeah. We're going to hear a lot, I hope, an update on some of these sensitive issues, Chip, this Tuesday morning when Ag Secretary Vilsack attends a Senate hearing on appropriations on the budget request. And he's going to be asked about a lot of topics that we discuss on Signal to Noise,
Yeah.
the fertilizer. Hopefully he'll talk about maybe they could accelerate with the railroads, some of the deliveries, etc. Another issue, and it doesn't surprise me wherever I go and in my emails, is WIP plus.
Yep.
uh, Vilsack on AgriTalk has consistently said we're going to get details this month. Well, it's this month.
Yeah, it's we may even be past this month for when he first said that it was going to be coming our way.
And he'll be asked about that. Not only the details, and it should be two tranches like the livestock, WIP plus that they're going to rename again. That's just a political thing that they're doing. But when the payments will, will come out. But that's a needed program, and this affects, remember, 2020 and 2021 crops. So they have the information, or in many cases, most of the information they need. So Vilsack lately has talked about the structure of the new WIP plus. So we're going to
Okay.
see he's, I think, signaling some potential changes there. But that was another topic.
Right. Right. Jim, I want to talk at least briefly about something that you and Brian Grady, editor at Pro Farmer, worked on for last week's Pro Farmer newsletter. And that is the next step in the farm bill process because the hearings are underway. They a couple last week, uh, but the funding I think is conversation I think is really interesting.
Yes, yeah, in talking over the last few weeks to some lawmakers and some congressional aides, and a number of them said, "Don't be too certain that there won't be new additional funding for the next farm bill, whenever it is." Chip, I never put a date on it because we could well
Mhm.
have it changing for sure in the House. On the Republican control in 2023, maybe the Senate. It's going to be very close. That surprised me. So I'm not going to rule it out now. And they say that relative to the events where that's underway right now, the uncertainty in
Mhm.
the whole world, let alone the ag sector. So I don't know whether that signals a renewed focus on the Commodity Credit Corporation Charter Act. Remember, the maximum funding is $30 billion. Now,
Right.
there's been pushes by the Farm Bureau and lawmakers to bump that up to what, 55, $60 billion. That would give um, the Congress and the administration flexibility because let's be frank, the farm bill is just like a big dinosaur. It's hard to turn around.
Yeah.
So that would give the flexibility and just a real brief journey to the past. You remember Dr. Neil Harrell from
Oh
Iowa?
yeah.
Remember he had a suggestion, what, decades ago, that the ag sector is so important that maybe there should be a Federal Reserve equivalent for agriculture. To me, that's like a CCC board in
Right.
which only in emergency cases you could tap that funding. I
Right.
think it should be aired out again. I think he had a suggestion well before his time, but you could get an independent panel, House and Senate ag panel representation on that, because we need a more flexible funding mechanism for the business of agriculture that could take care of these major events that's happening in the world that no farm bill can deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting idea concept. Uh, but it stresses how important food security is to national security.
That they both link together. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And but it shows this is a teaching moment for the US citizens and the world about how important agriculture is,
Right.
both from the grains, the input side, the meat side, etc. I again in my speeches I tell participants, my city folk that I deal with, they ask, well, what do you have to look out for in your writing? And I go through economic policy, trade policy, energy policy, all that stuff, inputs. And they think, and they always tell me, boy, farmers have to be pretty smart.
Yes. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Okay, you mentioned a Federal Reserve for agriculture. Let's talk about the Federal Reserve. Had an interest rate increase last week, Jim.
Yeah, 50 basis points. And the market really was glad, at least the equity markets. And then they heave hoed the following day and went down
Right.
further than they went up.
Yeah,
Uh,
900 points up, 1250 down.
that signals to me that they want even larger cuts. Jay Powell, the Fed head, uh, basically ruled out a 75 point basis hike. He may have to rethink that.
Yeah,
So we're going to see. We're going to get CPI and producer price index updates this week, Chip.
right.
Now, most of them signal CPI could go down slightly. We'll see. But if that were to reverse and even go higher, and food prices continue to go higher, the Fed is going to have to probably look at that 75 basis point hike.
Yeah. Yeah, the rate of inflation may slow from last month slightly, but it's not going to slow enough to put our year to year gains in average hourly earnings or wage gains ahead of the rate of inflation. So we're still in a negative environment for the consumer out there as far as their earnings go.
We are, and the markets are signaling. I don't like to see this
That's
or say that they're signaling that they don't believe the Fed.
right.
So
I,
there's
I'm with you.
yeah, I don't know, competency. They're competent, but they just don't believe in their strategy.
Right.
So the markets are taking over right
Yeah, they
now.
don't trust the Fed right now.
They don't trust. They don't
Right.
trust. Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Okay. Another quick item from last week. It sounds like the Biden administration is willing to take a look at the tariffs that are on some Chinese goods that come into the country. Is that right?
Yes, but there's an internal conflict within the Biden administration. U.S. Trade Rep Catherine Tai, I think, doesn't want to lighten them up because she sees it as a lever on China relative to the Trump era phase one agreement, Chip. But there's others in the White House who are saying, that could help out in the inflation battle, especially in a number of areas. So we still don't have the final result of the tussle, within the Biden administration. But they've got about, I was told, about a 30-day review. So we could see something happen by the middle of June on whether or not they're going to lift some of the tariffs.
Okay. All right. Very good. Um, Over the weekend, uh, Jill Biden, the first lady, makes a trip to Kiev. Uh, Surprising.
Yes, it was. I always like, as long as she was protected, and apparently she was. I always like to see that first lady to first lady, if you will.
Mhm.
It shows the commitment on the part of the U.S. to that area and region of the world. It's just not Ukraine now, and uh, Putin, for Russia's leader, had the military parade and all that today. Victory Day they call it, and when of their role in defeating the Nazis. But he had a very revealing his topic. The Financial Times had a very revealing interview with the CIA director of the U.S., William Burns. And I would behoove any listener to go take a look at that because it says the bottom line was Putin is doubling down. He thinks that he cannot retrench, and there's other aspects in that interview that are very revealing that he thought that the time was right when he went into Ukraine, that if he didn't move then, the Western nations were just going to encroach upon him. There's some truth to that, maybe, but a lot of it was his internal thinking that some people think are flawed.
Well, Western nations may have encroached, but there was never going to be a Western nation invasion
No,
of
but he's
Russia.
blaming he's blaming now
I
today in the
understand.
speech. He's blaming it, and that's an errant observation. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. It's he's looking for ways to stay uh, out of jail, and
Yes.
that's not going to happen, as far as I can tell. Um,
Another question I get a lot, Chip, when I go out to speak from listeners is the cattle marketing issue, the calf.
yep. Yep.
And some of them, not all, say, are you and Chip against that? That's interesting that I get that. Yeah. And I go, no, it's just that we usually refer back to the analyst reports about it. So I thought I would address that head on.
Yeah.
I'm not either for or against it. I want as much open transparency in
Yeah.
that cattle pricing, and I know you do as well.
Yeah, on AgriTalk, we try to cover it as evenly as we possibly can. In the week that the hearings were held in the House and the Senate, We started with coverage from the U.S. Cattlemen's Association, who is very much in favor of the Cattle Market Price Discovery and Transparency Act. We continued it with Chuck Grassley, who wrote the bill, and is writing the bill, and then we wrapped up our coverage that week with the NCBA's reaction and take on how the hearings went. Uh, and with me, Jim, I understand when I read the economic analysis from the academics. I get it. I understand what they are saying, why they are saying, and how they come to the conclusions that they come to. I get it. But I also say there is so much smoke around this issue that there's got to be a fire burning someplace.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Well, okay, I think Melody was probably thinking about something other than Packers when she said this, but I'll go ahead and jump to Melody's comment here. Citizens need less teaching than corporate CEOs who put short-term financial gains over long-term health and security. Because we've had the Packers in there, the CEOs of the big four. They were accused of putting profits over what's good for the economy. There's when we talked with Phil Flynn last week, brought up the comments that are out there that the refiners should be taking some of the massive profits that they made in the first quarter and putting it back into the system to bring that price down at the pump. And Phil's reaction to that was, well, does that mean that we need to go back a year ago when they were losing money like crazy and start putting some money back into their pocket at that time?
Yeah.
So there's, and I think what Melody is talking about here is, do the CEO should the gas companies, the refiners, just say, listen, we're not going to export, we're going to keep it here? What if that happens, Jim? If the companies decide themselves to back away from the export market?
Well, the mostly you hear on the energy side is the reason why they're not so aggressive in increasing production. Now, this is in the gasoline and other oils, is the regulatory side. That they're saying, there's a limit on how much we can invest. If we're getting the clear signal from the White House in X year, they're going to come after us.
Right.
And they have to answer to shareholders
Yeah.
on that one. And that's your short term and long term. Any good company CEO and board, I think that's the most important thing, the board of directors, they should look at long term investment from a long term perspective. And in this case, it's very hard to do if you're in the oil industry when you have a White House coming out after you.
Yeah.
So that's called a dilemma.
Right. Another comment from D Jensen here. Inflation numbers being put out there are pretty useless. In agriculture, I'm pretty sure expenses are up 20% plus. Commodity grain and livestock prices up no more than 15%. Depends on where you're going to start your figures from on the gain in grain prices, because it's more than a 15% gain. There's no question. But the increase is up more than 20%. Absolutely. I've been arguing, Jim, that agriculture is basically showing the general economy what's coming.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And of course, with the logistics, the shipping problems, it's hurting the Midwest more. You look at state inflation numbers; they're up higher in the Midwest relative to the East and West Coast. But everything, I agree with the concept. The inflation rates are understated to perhaps significantly understated.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you, and if we do see a downtick in the CPI, Consumer Price Index, this week, I think it's temporary. And I think that that's probably correct. I think there is going to be a downtick uh, because when you contract the economy like we did in the first quarter of this year, that's going to impact consumer prices somehow, some way. We're still going to see inflation at probably 7.5%. I think something
Yeah.
like that.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but uh, but we we contracted the economy in the first quarter. We can't forget that. I think people are glossing over that because we are in a period where we are raising interest rates. You don't normally do that coming off a quarter that had negative GDP.
No, we're out of cycle. We're out of
Yes.
cycle. And again, history shows the Fed to control inflation, interest rates have to be above
Of
the rate of inflation. And as you just said, we're still basically flirting at 0 to what, 1%
yeah, yeah.
real rate.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Um no, I'm gonna save Gary's question for the end here. You mentioned that Secretary Vilsack is going to be testifying on Tuesday. We're also going to get some comments from President Biden tomorrow on inflation, how he's going, the plan to fight it.
Yes, but regretful. I think he'll have some things to say of note, but they're going to put the politics too much on it, from what I can gather. They're going to put how the Republicans are doing their inflation aspects, and they're going to pick
Okay.
one particular senator, Scott from Florida, who had a tax increase recommendation of which the minority leader Mitch McConnell fought against, but they're going to hype it. So
Okay.
once again, we're going to see the political battle on a very sensitive issue, Chip.
Okay. Speaking of a political battle on a sensitive issue, can you believe that that document was leaked from the Supreme Court?
Uh, they're no.
It's a turning point for America, Jim.
In this environment, yeah, it's just not a good sign. And then all the commentary. When you really look into this issue over the decades, Chip, that at least I have, if this is true and they do come out and have the votes to deal with Roe v. Wade, it just puts it to the states.
Yeah.
This does not ban abortion.
No.
So that's really the bottom line. But the Democrats need a big issue because they're going to be plundered November 8th election. So they are and will run with this one, you know.
Yeah.
But this is a very personal subject with almost every American. There's no right or wrong answer, and this is not going to be extended to other issues. At least that's what the document said. This is a solo issue here relative to moving it to the states.
Right.
Canada and Mexico has already said that they will offer abortions to Americans. So you've got that already surfacing. It's just odd, and it just shows you the sensitivity. Then you have the illegal aspect of some groups putting the addresses of Supreme Court
Yeah.
justices' homes. That is against the law to
Right.
to do that at their home. So I hope our Justice Department will correct that. But
Not a chance.
yeah,
Not a chance. Not a
it's
chance.
not good of the sensitivity of what could happen under an
Yeah.
environment like that.
Yep. Now, Jim, you did an outstanding job talking through the issue. And the issue is important on every level. I'm just talking about the fact that the document was leaked from the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
If it was a clerk, they go to jail for a long time. It's treasonous what has happened.
Well, it goes into the shooting, the watering down of the independence of a key
Yes,
body of our nation, the Supreme. It's called the Supreme Court.
right.
And so, yeah, it is not a good development. It's the sign of the times,
Yeah,
regretfully, you know.
it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Uh, Democrat senators want to spend $1 billion to boost conservation operations. What is that about?
That's about what I say under the next farm bill. It's mainly going to be evolutionary, not revolutionary, except in two areas: conservation and climate change.
Yeah,
And this goes into that. There's already hefty funding for the food and nutrition program spending. The administration has already taken care of that executive wise. But
right.
this is another signal after a recent big increase in conservation in the fiscal year 2022 spending bill, Chip. A number of senators already want $1 billion more. Uh, this just tells me, and it's going to happen some way somehow in either a must-pass bill or the next farm bill. Now, some of the funding is needed because of not only the number of farmers who want to uh, go into various conservation programs, but in the implementation of them,
Okay.
and that brings NRDS into it.
Right.
So you need that. It's just a chunk of money, and I think it's going
Yeah.
to be spent. It will be found.
It's always a chunk of money, no
Yeah.
question about that. The plan from the White House to boost wheat and soybean production through the crop insurance program and through higher marketing loan rates and everything. We talked about it last week. It said, nah, it probably isn't going to have much impact. American Soybean Association came out last week, said, it's probably not going to have much impact,
No, right.
but it's picking up some support.
From Deputy Secretary Jewel Bronow. She was asked by Politico, who broke the story either over the weekend or today. I know I quoted them saying it. And basically, she said she supports it because those acres are needed. And when pressed, she said, well, because she was told, a number of economists said it won't have much impact. And she said, well, what if prices go down a lot?
Yeah,
Well, they would have to go down a lot, even though
lot.
those loan rates were increased, what, 868 and for
Yeah,
beans and 552 wheat. So just that was an odd comment. We have not yet heard officially from Secretary Vilsack on this one. I know a number of Republicans will ask him about that. So we're
right.
going to get and Vilsack
Okay,
is usually a trooper who will defend the administration, but we're going
right.
to see how he dances around this one.
All right, let's wrap it up with this question from Gary. If Jim had to put money on the next huge news story, what would it be? I'm talking October surprise size.
I think you saw it in May with the Supreme Court leak.
Yeah,
That's the only thing, and that can go both ways,
yeah,
on it. The only other October surprise would be a continuation of the debt forgiveness in the students, not total, but again, that swings both ways at all, as well. So, but I think you've seen the biggest one with the Supreme Court because you can see the volatility of the comments from Elizabeth Warren and our vice president on this particular issue. They don't want to talk about the leak. That's
right,
Adam Schiff's the same thing. Well, that's a side issue, they say.
right,
Well, it
right.
isn't a side issue. So I think you've already seen it, and that's their Hail Mary, pass, if you will.
All right, we are out of time. Stay tuned to profarmer.com for more information from Jim this week. This morning on AgriTalk, we've got Machinery Pete, and we'll talk land values with Doug Hensley from Hertz Real Estate. Great job this morning, Jim. Thank you. Have a great week, everybody. Keep watching for those signals.